Fantasy Football Night in America is live here on the Better Sports Network. This is the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on BSN. I am your host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. Want to welcome in our guest co-host tonight, the guest co-host with the most. You know him for his 2037 7-round mock draft that is already out there somewhere on the interwebs. You follow him on the X at Shane P. Hallam. He is from DraftSharks, Shane Hallam. Shane, welcome aboard tonight, my friend.
No, thanks for having me back. Bulky, always happy to come on and always excited at this time of year when we were a month out from the NFL draft and it's rookie season for everyone and dynasty and redraft, everything in between. So I'm pumped.
One of the things that I think is important, and Shane, I'm going to let you give your history with the NFL draft here shortly. But one of the things I always think is awesome about you is to come on this show. And I knew you were coming on this week. I know that no matter what prospect I chose in the draft, and this is a fantasy football show, so it's quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends. But I knew, like, even if I picked some sort of day 3 defensive lineman, you could go off on 10 minutes on him. Which is always fun. Matt Schauf was just saying this on the latest DraftSharks podcast that he did with Jared Smola. He said, what an addition Shane was to DraftSharks, because now, and I think he used Jalen Coker was the example, where last year he didn't know who Jalen Coker was, but had you been with DraftSharks at this time last year, he could have reached out to you. Who's Jalen Coker? And you could have written a dissertation on Jalen Coker coming out of college and into the pros, because you know these guys back and forth. I think the last time you and I did this show, it was February of last year. And if I remember correctly, you were already either working on or you had your 7-round mock out 11 months or something like that. Do you already have a 2026 7-round mock out there somewhere?
Look, there is still one up that I've had. Actually, I think I have a 2027 mock up somewhere. So if DraftSharks, I got a little more fantasy focus, but I am up to I think I'm over 250 skill position players, so QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end that I've watched in this class so far.
So tonight it's going to be a little bit different of a show. We are going to normally I like to go around the NFL, tell you everything that's going on. Not tonight. We're going to be, this is a rookie focus show. I always like to, kind of know what our guest co-host wants to talk about every week. I know Shane is well-versed in the rookies, so we are spending the full 2 hours on rookies. First segment is going to be all about the backfields. We'll tackle the running backs. We'll tackle the quarterbacks. Second segment, we're going to go into the pass catchers. So we will analyze the wide receivers. We will get deep into the tight ends, probably deeper into the running backs and tight ends that we've gotten on this show over the last couple months. And then the final segment, I want to talk about the DraftSharks Superflex rookie rankings. Now, the non-Superflex and Superflex rookie rankings available at DraftSharks.com. I want to tackle the Superflex Dynasty rookie rankings to give everybody a little bit of tangible advice that you can take as you get into your rookie drafts coming up. Before we get started, I want to mention, because the FFPC is the sponsor of the show, a lot of the advice that Shane, a lot of the content Shane's going to create tonight and a lot of the stuff that he's going to talk about, you can use this to your advantage in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball drafts. 4 weeks from now, we will have the start of the NFL draft. 4 weeks from now, both those tournaments will shut down. Those tournaments have been going since January. They will stop on the first round, before the first round of the NFL draft, a $40,000 and a $10,000 grand prize for the Classic and the Superflex drafts, respectively, $125 and $35 entry fees. Drafts are available with a 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clock right now at myffpc.com. While you're there, check out the Big Gorilla Tournament. This is the old Fantasy Pros Championship. It is now the Big Gorilla Tournament, a $1 million grand prize. You'll get a $50 discount for every third team you buy. Drafts are already running now, both live and slow drafts. The early Rampage and 7 Bananas promos are live. Bear in mind, if you join those drafts right now, that Big Gorilla draft, you're already entered in the early Rampage draft. So you're getting 2 tournaments for the price of 1 entry fee. And the 7 Bananas promos have been great. We've awarded a ton of $125 free best ball teams. We just awarded our first main event entry for somebody who got the 7-pick 3 drafts in a row. And I think he's continuing on. So if he gets the 7-pick 4 times in a row, he's going to get that $10,000 entry fee into the high society draft coming up in September at Paris Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. MyFFPC.com is where to go. And perhaps the most tangible advice that we're going to give to you tonight will be best offered into the FFPC Dynasty Orphans we have available right now. Entry fees range from $77,000 to $5,000. However, a lot of those entry fees have been lowered for 2025. 1,800 plus leagues over the last 15 years. None have ever folded in the last decade and a half. When you play Dynasty at the FFPC, you're in it till you don't want to be in it anymore. That's at myffpc.com. myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch, tonight. Shane, let's get going. We do not talk about Ashton Jeanty a whole lot on this show. And probably the reason is because everybody else is talking about him. He seems not only the 101 in traditional rookie drafts, he seems like he is the 101 in Superflex drafts as well. Nick Underhill, who covers the New Orleans Saints, has said that the Saints met with Ashton Jeanty when they were at Boise State's Pro Day. This was just earlier this afternoon, and they are looking, quote unquote, hard at the rookie running back prospects in this draft, including but not limited to Ashton Jeanty. He says it's a need for the Saints. No crap. Alvin Kamara on borrowed time in New Orleans. They need to find a future at both quarterback and running back. The Saints also reportedly met with Trevor Etienne from Georgia and Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. The Saints actually obviously know Tennessee fairly well when they had Alvin Kamara, when they were scouting Alvin Kamara, who is still with the team right now and on borrowed time. Kellen Moore is the new head coach in New Orleans right now. And he played quarterback at Boise State, which is Ashton Jeanty's school right now. He says he likes Jeanty quite a bit. We have heard over the last, and I don't, sometimes I never know how this is going to go, Shane, when it comes down to, this close to the NFL draft. I've heard Omarion Hampton, some teams have him on the same level or the same plane, the same tier as Ashton Jeanty. But we've talked a lot of Hampton. We'll talk more about Hampton later on in the show. But when you look at Jeanty, historically, I think this is where his profile comes into play. Where do you rank him among some of the greatest running back profiles we've seen over the last 5-10 years? You think about Saquon Barkley, you think about Bijan Robinson. I guess the question here for you, a guy who has scouted rookies over the last 10, 15 years, how good is Ashton Jeanty when we compare him to some of the best running backs over the course of the last decade plus?
So I've been doing this since 2004. That was the first draft that I covered. Ashton Jeanty will rank as my 7th running back of all time in terms of grade. So it's Adrian Peterson 1, Reggie Bush 2, Bijan Robinson 3, Trent Richardson 4, Todd Gurley 5, Saquon Barkley 6, and I think Jeanty is next. That's for my personal.
Who is 8 on that list? Just curiously.
Actually, Jonathan Taylor, who wasn't picked as highly as those guys, but I had him ranked as a top 15 pick in that draft.
So Jeanty is 7th in the last 20 years. And this is a guy that, I guess it comes down to this, Shane. How hard are you thinking about, let me formulate this scenario. Let's say you're drafting your rookie draft prior to the NFL draft, which some, places do, not a lot of places do. If you were doing that, how hard would you think about going against Ashton Jeanty, knowing that we don't know landing spot? Is he like landing spot proof? He's probably going in the top 10 of the draft. It doesn't really matter. At that point, are you just like, or at this point right now, is Jeanty slam dunk no brainer, or is there more nuance to that decision?
I think he's slam dunk no brainer. Look at that list of 7. In terms of rookie performance, I'll set all 6 of those guys ahead of him on my list performed. We know what happened to Trent Richardson, but everyone else, has been an absolute fantasy stud. Reggie Bush disappointed, but was a really good fantasy player in PPR leagues for a long time. Yeah, I think Ashton Jeanty's profile, the one caveat everyone says is Boise State. His best game this year was against Oregon, the second best defense in the Big Ten. And if you watch that game, every single play, you're like, what? How's this guy still on his feet? I mean, he's getting hit by 320-pound linemen, and that contact balance is just so good. What I like to do is kind of watch the worst game of a player. And, at Penn State playoff, very difficult defense. Ashton Jeanty had like 80 some yards, and everyone's like, oh, it was a bad game. But you watch him, and the blocking was so bad. I mean, Penn State, Abdul Carter's going to get picked top 2, blowing past offensive linemen. And Jeanty's picking up 3-4 yards when he's getting hit 2 yards behind in the backfield. I think those type of running backs are just so, team dependent. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you look at Bijan Robinson. How much did Arthur Smith try to handcuff Bijan Robinson? I mean, he tried as hard as any coach could, and he just, he still performed as an RB1 in that offense. I think that's what Jeanty brings to the table. He's going to be a top 10 pick at the running back position in this day and age. You have to be a difference maker, not just in the rushing game, but the receiving game. We saw that 2 years ago with Jeanty. He didn't do it as much this past season. I wrote a profile up on DraftSharks on Jeanty, breaking down the film, clips of his film. And it's just really outstanding how he mentally understands. He reminds, this is going to sound really lofty comparison, but something that Barry Sanders always talked about doing was he always looked at the next level of the defense to set up what he was going to do. He's not looking at the guys in front of him. He knows he can get past them. Jeanty does that. He's moving to get past the linebackers. And once he gets past the D-line, he's looking at the defensive backs, level 3, to see how he can move to avoid the level 3 players, and that's how he makes these big runs and big plays. Boise State stopped throwing the ball because it didn't throw the ball to him because it's much more effective just to hand it off, let him do his thing. To me, that's a top 10 running back of all time.
Let me ask you this: if he does not have that big game against Oregon, let's say he was average or maybe below average in that game, knowing that was like his big, sell to those people, say, oh, he doesn't play anybody, easy schedule or whatever. If he has a bad game against Oregon, knowing what he did in all these other games over the course of his career, how much would you ding him for that? Like, in other words, are we double counting the Oregon game? Are we counting it too much? How much stock do you put into that game if it doesn't happen?
I think that it gets tougher to take a look and say, oh, we don't know if he can do it against these top defenses, because they didn't really play anyone in the Mountain West this season. You had Washington State and UNLV had a decent defense. Oregon State had a pretty good defense. But I think it's harder to make that justification, when he only got 104 yards on 30 carries against Penn State. But then it comes down to the traits and what he's doing. I always say when you look at smaller school players, people are always ding level competition. But then I say, look at the offensive line. Go look at the offensive line at Ohio State and go look at the offensive line of Boise State, right? When we're comparing these running backs. And that's a big difference too. So I think he would still be a top 15 pick in this draft, even without that game.
So that, and I think that's, indictment's the wrong word, but I think that's a strong stance on Jeanty, knowing that even if he doesn't have that big Oregon game, for all the haters out there, like, you could still be great in the pros. Have your 7-round draft handy, Shane, because I'm going to ask you this question a lot tonight. Where do you have Jeanty going in your draft, in your mock right now? I've seen a popular one has been the Raiders at 6. Another one is the Bears at 10. It feels, I'm old enough to remember when everybody was picking Jeanty to the Cowboys in the first round too, which I don't see a whole lot anymore because he's usually going before that. Currently, where does Shane Hallam have Ashton Jeanty going in his latest NFL mock draft?
So I have him going 6 to the Raiders right now, which, like you said, is a pretty common pick. It's probably his ceiling. I don't think he's going in the top 5 of this draft. But I think the Raiders at 6, when you know what Pete Carroll likes to do and how he likes to set up his offense, having a good running back, I think with Geno Smith would help set that identity and that culture that they're looking for. I think 9 to New Orleans is really strong. It is a really strong possibility for the way that offense is running. I mean, we saw it, we saw it last season with the Eagles in Kellen Moore, how much a running back makes a difference in Kellen Moore's offense. I think Ashton Jeanty would bring that to the table for the Saints.
I want to ask you about, and this is a big drop off because we're gonna come back to the other big time running backs in this draft, but I want to skip past the Ohio State guys, Caleb Johnson, so on and so forth. Let's drop down to Brashard Smith here for a little bit. Brashard Smith is a player, and I feel like as much as we do this show and I do on my other shows, I feel like there's always players I could be talking more about, and we're going to focus on a lot of those players tonight. Brashard Smith, I have heard of so many good things from a lot of pundits out there talking about how good this guy is going to be at the next level, and yet he is not a first-round pick. He's probably not a second-round pick. What do we need to know fantasy-wise about Brashard Smith, of why this guy is somebody you need to be keeping in the back of your mind when the second round of your NFL Dynasty rookie draft start going?
We always talk about players that are better in the real NFL than fantasy. I think Brashard Smith's the opposite. I think he's going to be a better fantasy player for us, because this is a former 4-star wide receiver that went to the University of Miami and then wasn't getting the playing time at receiver. He's such a good athlete. He transfers to SMU and they didn't know how they were going to use him. I literally, the coach said we recruited him, so we don't know how we're going to use you, but you're going to get on the field here. And Brashard Smith was fine with that. And running back was the best spot. And he absolutely tore it up. So similar to Tyrone Tracy last year, who ended up being a steal in not just dynasty rookie drafts, but also, the never too early redrafts at FFPC. You have this conversion where a player has those receiver skills for PPR, but has shown, he carried that SMU offense in a lot of ways on his back to that college football playoff. Without Brashard Smith, they don't sniff that. And I play college fantasy football, and Brashard Smith was amazing for me week to week because he's catching all these passes and he's running for big gains, 5.67 yards a carry. Tracy was a bigger guy, and I think that helped Tracy as a rookie in the NFL, whereas Brashard Smith's only 196 pounds, came in at 194, just under 5'10" at the combine, but runs a 4.39, has that speed. In the DraftSharks rookie guide, which is free at DraftSharks if you want it, I comped him to Nyheim Hines, if you remember from the Colts. That's who Brashard Smith's going to be. I don't think he's going to be the lead back somewhere and getting 300 carries, but this is a player that you draft in the 4th round, and he's going to be so good at getting screen passes and taking them 20, 30 yards and swinging out and catching passes, and that you just need to get him on the field. I think he's a really good number 2 on an offense that throws the ball a lot. I think Brashard Smith could be, let's get a better fantasy player like Hines was than maybe a real NFL player.
I look at NFL mock draft database quite a bit. If you look at the mocks on there over the course of the last month or so, they have him, Brashard Smith, as a day 3 pick, and yet there's a lot of people excited about him. Shane, I don't know I don't know if you've done, quite frankly, I'm putting you on the spot right now. I don't know if you've already done any analysis. Where do day 3 running backs stack up as far as, rookie drafts, their rookie year? Are these guys just, hey, let's put them in the incubator and we'll see what happens because they just need an opportunity? Where do you stand on these guys that are going to be going day 3 where that the NFL team that's drafting him does not believe the opportunity is imminent where they can be a fantasy force year 1? But when you look at how these guys turn out down the road, is it worth targeting these guys at the back end of the second round, the third round of your dynasty rookie drafts?
So if you take the whole pool of day 3 running backs and look at hit percentage, it's going to be really bad, right? A lot of running backs are drafted, any player drafted on day 3. You have 4 rounds to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely see round 4, round 5 players emerge to be really good fantasy and dynasty picks, right? We can point them out every year. I'll point to the Bucky Irvings and the Tyrone Tracys or the Chase Browns and of the world, right? There's always a couple that kind of stand out. I think opportunity is more important on day 3. Situations more important. I don't care where Ashton, Jeanty, or Omarion Hampton go; they're going to get playing time if they're getting drafted that high. But you have to go somewhere like Tracy with the Giants, or like we saw with Bucky Irving in the Buccaneers, where there's an opening for you. Braylon Allen was always going to be capped his first year on the Jets behind Breece Hall. So I think Brashard Smith's that player. He's probably not going in the top 100 picks. But if he goes to a team that has a hole in that number 2 receiving back, then it's someone I'm interested in that late second, early third round. I don't let situations sway me a ton, but I think when you're taking shots on some of these later round running backs, and the other thing you have to remember too, is the position. We know how the NFL feels about running backs. They're falling a little bit. This class is really good. It's probably the deepest running back class since 2017 with Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey year.
Kamara, Aaron Jones, Kareem Hunt, Joe Mixon. Yeah.
I mean, it's such
Melvin
a good James Conner. Like we had a really heavy year. So, what does that do? That means running backs are going to get pushed down. If I'm a team that kind of wants a running back, needs a running back, it's late in the second, early in the third, but it's a deep class. The guy I think is going to be there in a round or 2 rounds. There's a couple players I like. I might wait a round. And so you could have players that we expect to go third round fall to the 4th round. And we need to accept that and understand that that's not like the death knell just because it's Saturday instead of Friday that we need to write these guys off. So I think Smith's going to fall into that category depending on where he ends up.
If Smith is in the draft last year, is he a day 2 pick?
I think he's close. I think he's probably in that 4th round with Bucky Irving, with Will Shipley. He's grading out around those players for me. So I think he grades above Tyrone Tracy just because of the excellent year that Smith had. That Tracy never really had that kind of production this past year at Purdue.
Let me throw this at you. I knew I was going to fall down some rabbit holes tonight. With the NFL's what would I say? Motivation or focus for offenses now that they can't throw it deep, that they can't have these long developing plays. 1, because pass rushers are getting more skilled, pass rushers are getting better, and 2, and this is probably more important, the 2 safeties, 2 high safety that has taken over the NFL, that has really limited explosive plays. We saw the data last year for explosive plays. One of the lower amounts of explosive plays we've seen in years in the NFL. To me, that suggests, hey, you got to have a good running back. You got to have guys that can make people miss at the line of scrimmage and get those chunk yards with that 1 fewer player in the box. And that's how you move the ball down the field. Maybe not exciting, but this is how you win games. With this really talented class coming into the NFL, doesn't this strike you as sort of a focus point, sort of a come to Jesus moment where the way that the NFL is trending and the talent that's coming in at the NFL at the running back position, they meet at like a high level this year, and people put more of a focus on the running backs considering how talented they've been. We saw how they treated running backs in the 2024 draft. Shane, are we going to see 2025 running backs? And I said this, I've been saying this quite frankly a couple of months now. Just backfields being blown up with people taking running backs in round 2, with people taking running backs in round 3. You think your veteran is safe. He's not safe because we're going to see a ton of backs drafted on day 2. How do you see the confluence of talent and the way the NFL is going as far as it goes with the 2025 NFL draft specifically?
I think that confluence is happening, and the NFL, even year to year, it is a league that's going to jump on those trends. And I think seeing the success of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry just is cueing in teams like, hey, this is a way to win. This is a way to force that safety up if we don't have it. And I think we saw a lot of teams, even this offseason, right, let go running backs that were good, that were serviceable. And Najee Harris, for example, was fine, 1,000 yards every year, but you could probably draft a round 3 running back and get that same production, right? So let's keep Jalen Warren from the Steelers and draft someone else in round 4 or round 3. I think that's what a lot of teams are kind of looking at. We'll sign. I always talk about this in the NFL draft in general, not just running back position, but any position. When teams are signing these players to 1-year deals in free agency, even for a decent amount of money, they're oftentimes just hedging their bet, right? Because they don't know what they're going to get in the draft. But that tells me that's a position they want to address. But they'll draft a guy at that position if they can. If they can't, this is the fallback option. You know, the Chargers signed Najee Harris to a 1-year deal. Well, if there's a good running back out there, they're going to draft him. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that 1-year deal is doesn't matter that much. You know, the Chiefs signing Elijah Mitchell isn't going to impact them maybe drafting a running back. So I think a lot of teams are just not going to spend that big money in free agency, especially with there not being an elite running backs out there this year. And I think we're going to see some backfields blown up. And as much as we want in fantasy, all these running backs to go to all the running back needy teams, you know, the Jets will draft 3 of them again. Like that's what happens is you just, you know, you're going to have some guys go to the places that don't feel great. And even so, I think that opportunity, if they're talented enough, will present itself.
I think that's the other thing to keep in mind too. I can't remember who was talking. It might've been Sigmund Bloom. I can't remember, but talking about doing the bang, bang approach, right. With running back in this draft. Go back to 2017. We were talking about it earlier. The Packers needed running backs that year. They went bang, bang, bang. They drafted Jamal Williams in the 4th, Aaron Jones in the 5th. And a lot of people forget they went with Devontae Mays, who I think was out of Utah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shane. I think it was Devontae Mays out of Utah.
Utah State, yeah.
Utah State, thank you. See, he's the guru, people. He knows this stuff. This is 8 years ago, and Shane knows where these seventh rounders are going. And he didn't make the team, but obviously Jones and Williams tag teamed as a pretty good tandem till they let Williams go, and then Jones was the guy there, and Jones is still just signed a new 2-year deal with Minnesota. So we could see that in the draft this year. You know, think about the Cowboys who have kind of been pussyfooting around the running back position. We'll get Javonte Williams. We'll get who is the other guy they got in Dallas this year? They let Dowdle go to Carolina. There was another minor signing that they had in the backfield. I can't remember who it was.
Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders. I was going to say, I know it's worse than Javonte Williams. So they got Williams and Sanders there. They could easily go bang, bang in the draft, day 2 and day 3 for running backs. And all of a sudden their stable is looking a lot better. So I think it's important to understand, regardless of how you're preparing for your rookie drafts, understand that what you think you have in your backfield right now could be radically different come April 25th, come April 26th. I want to get back to how the NFL views running backs. And one of these guys that I think, I don't want to say polarizing, but he's close to polarizing, is DJ Giddens. I think, Shane, people are looking for not the Caleb Johnsons in drafts that, you know, have shown a penchant for being a guy in college that can carry the load, that can get you when you need 1 yard, he gets you 3 yards. When you need 3 yards, he gets you 3 yards. When you need 7 yards, he gets you 3 yards. That's how I view Caleb Johnson, right? I don't think people put an emphasis on that. They're putting an emphasis in the NFL on these explosive playmakers in the backfield. The guys that, yeah, they're going to get stuffed now and then, but every once in a while, they're going to rip off that 35-yard run or that 40-yard screen pass. And in order to do that, you have to have the intangibles, the stuff that can't be coached. And I think that becomes the emphasis that you look at when you're an NFL GM, when you're an NFL decision maker. You put that emphasis on these guys with the stuff that you can't coach. DJ Giddens could be one of those guys. I should ask you this. What can you say about the stuff that he does that cannot be improved once he gets to the next level because he just has this natural talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you watch Giddens, he's one of those players that just pops on film. You're like, this is an NFL player. And, you know, he's a 97 percentile athlete. I think his RAS was 9.75. So, you know, all the workouts that he's done has shown that he's that elite athlete, has that home run threat. You know, those are things that you're not going to be able to teach. I think there's a lot of running backs in that kind of day 2, day 3 fringe that have this type of ability. Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech's one of my favorites. Trevor Etienne, you know, Travis's brother from Georgia, who's never a lead back, but has that explosive ability, comes off the snap so quick, and then has the deep speed to keep going. If there's a hole, they're going to take it and they're going to run. So, you know, I think Giddens has that and could be. I think every year we get like a round 3 running back that we're like, oh, I don't know if he was a round 3 guy, you know, the Tyrion Davis Price and the Keyshawn Vaughns, you know, I think that we could see Giddens be that player. I think he's hopefully going to be better than those two. I used 2 poor examples of production and fantasy success and NFL success, but I think Giddens has that in him. I worry about his agility. I think with Tootin as well. They both have, they got that straight line speed down. But if you kind of put them in a box, you put a defender in front of them, they struggle with the short area quickness to get around a player and avoid, some of those hits. I mean, Giddens loves contact. And I think a lot of, you watch his highlights and he's running guys over. And I think for a lot of us, like, wow, that's old school style running back, like who has that explosion and speed and athleticism is really cool. But sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's the bad thing because he'll miss holes because he just runs into the defensive tackle. He's like, I could take this guy down. And I'm like, look, there was a hole right over here that he didn't quite have the agility to make that cut and go into that hole like he should. So I think he's someone, there's, like I said, a couple guys in this class, more that we may talk about that I think would be better in a primarily gap scheme where it's kind of, hey, you're going to this hole and that's where the play's going. You're going off tackle. You're doing a halfback dive. And that's the hole that you're going for. Don't freelance. And I think Giddens could be a RB1. I think he'd be a starter in the league if he's in the right scheme.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to this. And we'll talk about that more coming up in the second hour of how important fit is for these running backs. I mean, opportunity, obviously the most important, but fit is going to be something that we talk about as well. One of the guys, and I wouldn't say I loaded up on him early in my best ball drafts here over the course of the last couple of months, Shane. But I do have a healthy amount of Devin Neal. And the more I look at Devin Neal, the more I'm like, God, the college production is there. But is he special enough to be a difference maker at the next level? If you asked me that question at the end of January, I thought he was. You asked me that question at the end of March now, I'm really questioning it. And I don't know if he does. Your thoughts on Devin Neal? Obviously, if he gets the opportunity where somebody tears an ACL, somebody's out for a significant amount of time, Devin Neal can come in and get the job done. But is he special enough to be a potential league winner in year one, or even, quite frankly, in his rookie contract in the NFL? How do you view his skill set?
He's tough to pick. He's a divisive one in the DraftSharks room. Jared Smolo's one of the sharpest fantasy guys that exists. Really likes Devin Neal, and I think for good reason. The production, 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, his super early breakout. Like I think a lot of the statistics and analytics really favor what Devin Neal does. He has that size of 213 pounds, ran in the 4.5s. But a lot of the small technique issues that, honestly, because he was talented and athletic and played for Kansas and wasn't really challenged, that he just never got better at, really scare me. I mean, he runs very upright. Like, those type of players are easier to bring down, more susceptible to injury. He's not very patient. He's not going to, wait for the hole to develop a little bit. He can't kind of slow down and explode. He has one gear, one speed. And the other thing that, sometimes we underrate perhaps is the blocking. He doesn't block well at all. And that might not matter for us. But if Devin Neal's a 4th or 5th round pick, then to get on the field, he has to block. And that's always a fear of mine. So I think he is one. If he gets the opportunity, I think Devin Neal, injury happens. He goes on the field, runs for 100 yards and a touchdown. You're like, oh, this guy's pretty good. But he could be one player that we just never see him get that opportunity if he doesn't get day 2 draft capital.
Which is why draft capital is so important, why opportunity is so important, because we talk up all these guys as players that could be huge difference makers, but more often than not, they're not because of draft capital, because of the lack of opportunity. So it's always something that we're talking about that may or may not pay off. One of those other players that we'll get into now is RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey is a player that I have heard a lot of pundits talk about as, I shouldn't say a lot, a few of them have said, this is my guy, Shane. I love RJ Harvey this year. This is my running back. When all the other running backs are gone, somebody's going to draft RJ Harvey. He's going to be ready to play right away, and he's going to be a difference maker. He was in the Senior Bowl, 5'9", but officially measured at the Senior Bowl at 5'8", 207 pounds. Normally that's not ideal size, but I've reevaluated what quote unquote ideal size is since Bucky Irving last year. And so I don't want to take it with a grain of salt, but I don't put as much emphasis in it. He has made defenders miss. This is a guy that I think that a lot of people, even, Senior Bowl, NFL Combine, whatever, I feel like he's on the uptick. Are you also a fan of RJ Harvey? And if he is, I don't want to say given the keys to the convertible, because he's not, but if that situation presents itself where he is maybe the 1B or maybe the second guy, and then there's an injury, could he get it done right away? Does he have what it takes to put in a Bucky Irving-esque season? Because this is a guy that is not going to have heavy rookie draft capital as long as nobody goes crazy on him on day 2 in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I definitely don't have him rated in that Bucky Irving area. I mean, I think he's a sneaky sleeper right now, but this is a player who's already 24 years old and, was playing at UCF. I think it was good to see him this year, as UCF kind of made the jump up to a higher level of competition, right? We got to really see him in the Big 12 the past 2 years dominate. I think that's positive to have 2 1,400 plus, rushing seasons. 38 rushing touchdowns in those 2 years is insane for any running back. But he was older than a lot of the defenders he was going up against, and I think it was kind of obvious. I don't think RJ Harvey does anything special. He kind of takes what's there and does a good job at that. He's athletic. Like you said, I like shorter running backs. I think they're harder to bring down, but he doesn't necessarily break tackles like an elite running back does. I think it was a really good scheme and fit for him. He's someone who, once again, the production kind of says, hey, he can get it done if he's in a situation with a good offensive line and everything around him kind of lines up and the box isn't stacked. I don't think he's going to make his own way. I don't think RJ Harvey's going to become Bucky Irving, where he's able to create yards and create opportunities. I think RJ Harvey is going to need a good system around him, which certainly could happen in the situation. But I wouldn't bet on it if he goes to a subpar team or, is buried a little bit on the depth chart. I don't think he's going to magically rise up.
Talking running backs here with Shane Hallam from DraftSharks. And one of the running backs that I can guarantee we have not talked about all this season is Marcus Yarns. The pride of Delaware. The pride of Delaware has shifted, right? It used to be, now it's Marcus Yarns. Before that, 46th president of the United States, Joe Biden, although half the country would disagree with that. And then before that, Dante DiVincenzo, NCAA March Madness Final Four hero from Villanova, who was from Newark, Delaware. Marcus Yarns, though. I know he's a favorite of Jason Allwine from Player Profiler. I have a lot of people telling me that Yarns is really, really good. But Shane, if he's that good, why is he not mocked higher? Why do we not see him go higher in these NFL drafts? Why do we not see him higher on rookie mock drafts? So I guess the question here is, if he's not that high, should we just forget about him? Is this a guy that's totally dependent upon situation because the talent is just not good enough? What's the quick and dirty on Delaware's Marcus Yarns?
So, look, I'm the guy that always wants to tout the small school players. I mean, I was Mr. pound the table for James Robinson. Then he went undrafted, and I was still I'm going to live on that for a while for his first year. But, I think it's just going to be difficult. I want to bang the table for Tristan Mashad, the wide receiver out of South Dakota, who didn't get a combine invite. But Marcus Yarns, I like him, but in this running back class, it's just really hard to like him more than 20 other guys. When you didn't have 1,000-yard rushing season at Delaware, what are you going to do in the NFL? He has the skill set. I think he has the speed. You see him not take direct hits and be able to kind of bounce off of players. I think the vision's solid. I think the skills are all there, but he's not someone that when the hole closed up, could make something happen. When he had a freelance or kick outside, but it just takes too long to get there. And I don't think he has a natural feel for the game. And I think it's a really hard thing to develop on the fly if you're a 5th, 6th round pick. You better have that and be ready to go. So I don't count him out. Like I said, I love my small school guys and hope he's successful. But yeah, he's a player that is probably even further down my board than a lot of people's board. I think he's my RB 26 in this class, and that's even in a deep class. I think he deserves to be drafted, but I think he's going to be more, 6th, 7th rounder.
Forgot to talk about one of the other former best Delawareans alive, Jason Kahn, former $200,000 high stakes fantasy football champion, would tell me Joe Flacco, an elite NFL quarterback who won a Super Bowl with the Ravens, who was also from Delaware as well. I think I've listed everybody of Delawarean significance. Let me know on the YouTube chat if I've forgotten anybody on Twitch or whatever. But I think that's pretty much it for fantasy football. Speaking of quarterbacks, Shane, let's get into that. We talked about running backs. We'll touch on the running backs again later on in the show. I want to talk quarterbacks with you. You have written some deep dives on some of these quarterbacks, and you can check those out over at DraftSharks.com, which is your and I always say I'm a huge fan of DraftSharks. I use the war room for a lot of my drafts that, whether I'm drafting in KFFSC or private dynasty leagues or private redraft leagues or whatever, it is a fantastic tool. But DraftSharks.com also had your write-ups for a lot of these rookies. Shedeur Sanders, there is limited fantasy upside for this guy, according to you. Tell us why that is. What have you seen from him that would suggest that?
So when Shedeur Sanders gets drafted, and let's assume he starts week 1, he'll be only one of 2 starting quarterbacks in the NFL who had negative rushing yards in college. Jared Goff is the other one, who obviously turned out pretty good, but had a rocky, number 1 overall pick, little rocky start.
And then he needed. I mean, look at when he's been most successful. Great offensive line, great playmakers, great offensive mind. That's when he's been most successful. If Shedeur Sanders gets all that, hey, yeah, it could be really good. But look at all the things that had to go right for Goff. I'm sorry, continue.
No, I think that's exactly where Shedeur Sanders is at, right? I mean, you had the Heisman Trophy winner catching passes from you, and that helped. Shedeur Sanders just has some really bad quarterback tendencies that I think in the NFL are going to be exacerbated tremendously. When the play's not there, he's good at reading a defense. I think between the ears, Shedeur Sanders has it. You can see him go through progressions, see him read a defense. The problem comes in when the play isn't there, when it's taking too long, and he starts drifting backwards. The most sacked quarterback over the past 2 years, and offensive line wasn't great, whatever. But if you're the most sacked quarterback, a lot of it's on you. And he would just drift backwards, and these edge rushers, and super easy to come off the edge and sack him. Or if there was interior pressure, I mean, Shedeur Sanders didn't know how to keep his eyes down the field. Maybe we'll talk about Cam Ward. There's a very stark difference to me between how those players work when the play is breaking down. And then the arm strength, it's just he doesn't have the arm that I want an NFL starting quarterback to have. Look, we've seen Tom Brady. You can bring him up, and Tom Brady didn't have the strongest arm. And great, if Shedeur Sanders is Tom Brady in terms of reading and manipulating a defense, he'll be fine. And we talked earlier about cover 2 defenses, too deep is very prominent. Shedeur Sanders can't really beat the cover 2 because he has to thread that needle between the corner and the safety on the sideline. And there's a lot of passes that he made, a lot of highlights that he made that in the NFL, I'm like, that's a pick, or that's an incomplete. This isn't going to work out. Then there's a handful of plays where if that's not Travis Hunter, you're in trouble. Nick Westbrook-Akine is not going to, make that catch or whatever, So it's why I think, Cam Ward's definitely the top quarterback in this class. And Sanders for fantasy, he's not going to run that much. He's got a little more athleticism than the stats look, but he's not going to have scripted runs. He's not going to be Jaden Daniels out there. I think for fantasy, we've learned how important that is to scoring fantasy points. And so when you're reliant on a player, just his arm and his throwing talent, and there's issues, I just think Shedeur Sanders might be an okay NFL quarterback, but I don't think he's going to be a good fantasy quarterback.
So let me ask you this, and this gets back to the NFL aspect of it, Shane. If you were an NFL GM, would you say, hey, this guy is worth one of the top 32 picks in the first round, or would you let him slide to day 2? And let me preface this by saying, I understand the need for quarterbacks. I've said on this show and all my shows, there are not 32 people on earth that can play the quarterback position in the NFL. So I understand what Cecil Lammey from Football Guys always says. I think he's like, there's 8 to 10 teams that have it made. There's 10 to 12 teams that are faking it. And then there's another 10 teams in the NFL that are just fooling themselves, which is true. But when you come down to Shedeur Sanders, is this guy worth a first round pick, Or would you just let him go to day 2 and say, hey, let's try this guy out and see what we got, but I don't want to soak my first round pick into him?
I couldn't use a first round pick on him, certainly. And he just doesn't grade that highly to me. I've gone back. I've watched now every game this season and every game last season. And honestly, it kind of gets a little worse the more I watch. Like, I'm trying to convince myself, like, what am I missing here? I do that a lot. And look, quarterback's a really hard position to evaluate. I don't pretend to be the be-all, end-all. I mean, I wouldn't have taken Michael Penix or Bo Nix in the first round, and I think, especially with Nix, certainly proved he was a first-round pick and should have been picked where he was. So I've been wrong in quarterback plenty. We all have. But I think Sanders is that player that I just don't see these consistent NFL throws that he's making at Colorado. And, the things that need to improve with him, I think are very difficult to improve. Like, there's Josh Allen's the only player that I've seen really be able to get better at almost everything that I thought quarterbacks couldn't, and I don't think Sanders has that.
And that caught me off guard. Like, I think Allen's the exception, because I thought when the Bills drafted Allen, I'm like, this is a whiff. I don't see this working out, and I've been proven wrong by that. But Shane, as we look at certain things that have gone on with rookie quarterbacks, I think Allen is more the exception to the rule, because most quarterbacks, where we don't think they're going to improve in certain areas because of historical representations by other quarterbacks that have been drafted that high, Allen is the exception. The other guys, like, yeah, we kind of knew this guy wasn't going to get better, and maybe Sanders is part of that group.
Yeah, I think so, and it's definitely a flag plant. He's definitely, because of who his dad is and how he played, it's big. But as I wrote in the write-up too, this is going to be the first time since middle school that his father wasn't a coach on the staff. Like, that's
could be a good thing.
It's true. It's true. But that's a tough adjustment, for anybody. So I worry.
Todd Hunter hanging out in the YouTube chat right now, already commenting on our beards. Shane, are you still I think you're still in the FFPC 500 Dynasty 1 league, right? Which was like the OG of FFPC Dynasty leagues.
I actually sold my team.
You did? Oh, you're out.
I finally am out, of that one. So it was a sad day.
Was Todd Hunter in that league with you?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
He was dominant in that league too, of course, as Todd usually is.
Yeah, tree huggers. Shout out to Todd Hunter, one of the very first guests on the high stakes fantasy footballer that we had like 13 years ago or whatever it was. He's like you. He is an OG. Cam Ward. We touched around him in the Shedeur Sanders conversation. It seems that he is going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. We saw, I can't remember who floated this out there today, but it was some reputable pundit that said the Titans are looking for 3 first-round picks. I think that's a bit of a negotiating thing. I don't think that they're required 3 first-round picks, but it kind of lets you know where they stand on what they're going to do with that 101 pick. When you look at Cam Ward going to Tennessee, knowing he's going to have Calvin Ridley, knowing he's going to have Chigakonkwo, and maybe some more pass catchers by the time the 2025 NFL draft is over, where does he stand among fantasy quarterbacks? I mean, is this a guy that we would look at as a top 12 player? At his ceiling? Is he a top 5 player at his ceiling? I don't know. I don't know what to make of him, because I know this is a weak class, but just because it's a weak class doesn't mean the top guy should be downgraded. How do you feel? What's your scouting report? What's the Shane P. Hallam scouting report on Cam Ward right now?
I think his ceiling is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I think he has that type of talent and skill set. It's an unlikely path to where he's gotten, to go from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami. But one thing for Cam Ward, I went back when I did his write-up for DraftSharks. I went back to his Incarnate Word tape and watched. And, I mean, you could see every step. You can see improvements mentally and physically from Cam Ward. And to me, that's such a huge thing, because in the NFL, you better get better. I don't think there's any quarterback that succeeded that didn't improve when he got to the NFL. And I think if Cam Ward's gotten better every step when he's played tougher competition and been in more complex offenses, I think that's huge. He has a live arm. I love how he extends plays, which is, I think, is required in the NFL nowadays. And I think that it's the right structure. Like you said, you have Calvin Ridley, you have, a pass catching running back, Tajay Spears and Chigakonkwo. I think Brian Callahan's offense is built well for Cam Ward. We saw what it did for Joe Burrow to kind of ease Joe Burrow in and then started putting more and more on his plate. And I think that's exactly what Cam Ward is going to need. My one fear is kind of a Caleb Williams syndrome, is that hero ball that we saw in the bad Caleb Williams games last year, where when things aren't going well, the Titans defense is going to give up a lot of points. Like Cam Ward tries to do everything. I mean, he is that guy that wants to win the game. Yep. We saw that last season where he fumbled away a game because he was just trying to keep extending the play and find the perfect pass down the field to get a big play when he had a wide open guy in the flat. Like just dump it off, man. There's 2 minutes left. You got time. I think those are some of the tendencies you got to get rid of. But I'd rather have a quarterback that does that than is scared, is scared to make a pass. And I think the Titans offensive line too is pretty strong as it stands right now. And so situationally, if he goes number 1 overall, I think it sets up Cam Ward for a QB1 future, maybe not as a rookie, but year 2 or 3.
That's what I was going to say about, you compare Ward and Williams, right? Because Williams had the playmakers, right? He had Keenan Allen, he had DJ Moore, he had Roma Dunze, DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet. He didn't have the offensive line year 1. Cam Ward, if he goes to the Titans, probably does have the offensive line year 1. But what does he have for playmakers? Okonkwo, Ridley. There's probably somebody else I'm forgetting. Pollard is whatever. Spears is kind of whatever.
Yeah, you're not putting Nick Westbrook-Ikine up there, or
no? I thought Westbrook-Ikine was gone. Wasn't he gone? What I thought he went to. I thought he signed with somebody else. Matt Deutsch can look that up. Our producer. I thought he was.
He's on. Yeah, he's on the signed with the Dolphins. So
Dolphins.
That's sad. That's a sad loss. I like that.
We're destroying Cam Ward now.
It's over. It's over.
All right. So here's the thing, and I want to. We're going to talk about Jaxson Dart, and I know we're up against it, but we're going to talk about Jaxson Dart in a second. Shane, as far as quarterbacks go, I always felt like two of the biggest things for future success in the NFL, guys who could extend the play and guys who could throw with anticipation. If you could do both those things, you are probably going to be a pretty good NFL quarterback. In your research, in your experience, what is the one thing that you are looking for most in a collegiate quarterback to come into the NFL to be a good professional quarterback? What's the one thing above everything else that he needs to do well that you would say, okay, I can buy into this guy?
Yeah, I think it goes with extending plays, but I think having pocket awareness of being able to feel pressure, know pre-snap where the pressure is coming from, be able to feel it while you're in your drop back, keeping your eyes down the field. I think it's such a tough thing that as an armchair quarterback, we're sitting here and looking like, man, why are you stepping into a defender or what? It's really hard when you have the best athletes in the world coming to crush you. But those guys that can kind of, take that noise away, they're able to make plays happen, especially in today's NFL. Receivers are going to get open. The worst receiving core, someone's getting open with the rules of the NFL. So if you are able to extend that play, feel that pressure, step up, step out when you need to, have a feel for what you need to do to not get sacked and have a clean passing lane, I think it's huge. And I think a lot of the other things, if you have the arm strength and you have enough throwing with anticipation, throwing a guy open, I think those things can come.
One of my the Dizzle, who is the co-founder of the FFPC, Dave Gerzak, who I've referenced on the show many a time, he hired me at one of his other businesses. This was 25 years ago or so. And there were certain things I didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. But one of the best pieces of advice he always gave me was, I don't know, Balky, be a Marine. I didn't know what that meant, be a Marine. And he told me be a Marine meant when you're in a situation where there is no playbook, there is no protocol, you just kind of figure it out for yourself and just make, the best choice with the information at your disposal. That's not unlike what an NFL quarterback has to do. There are certain situations presented to quarterbacks. They don't know what to do. There's no playbook for this. You just, I'm talking about within the play. But if you're a Marine and you just kind of make it up and you figure it out as you go along, those are the players that have had the most success in the NFL. Think about Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers is a perfect example of this. Drew Brees, I think, to a certain extent as well, at least in recent memory. You want to go back further, Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana. Those guys are perfect examples of this as well. But being a Marine, I think maybe is the best way to describe how the collegiate, or what collegiate stars go on to become good professional stars, how good they are as a Marine on the field. Something to throw out there. Todd Hunter has a question about running backs. Todd, I'm going to get to that in a second. I want to ask Shane about Jaxson Dart. I have seen him mocked in the first round in a lot of drafts. I talked to Peter Bukowski from the Locked On Packers podcast, The Leap, where he covers the Packers for, and he's deep into NFL draft coverage, not as deep as you, Shane, but he does not believe that Jaxson Dart is going to be a first-round pick. I have seen these quarterbacks pushed up quite a bit, and I'm on the fence right now. I think he still gets taken in the first round. Your opinion on Jaxson Dart right now? Number one, is he going to be a first-round pick, and who is his best pro comp right now in the NFL?
So I'm definitely conservative on quarterbacks. Like the NFL needs them, but I always feel like the NFL usually is smart about it and lets them fall. Malik Willis is that guy. And the last year, I had plenty of pie on my face for saying that we wouldn't have all those quarterbacks taken in the top half of the first round, and then it happened. So I kind of lean to Jaxson Dart not being a first-round pick, or kind of Lamar Jackson-esque of like really at the end, someone comes in or trades down and grabs him. I think that could be a possibility. In terms of pro comp, my comp in the DraftSharks rookie guide was Dak Prescott. Reminds me a lot of Dak in terms of like the highs are really high. And when Jaxson Dart is in a rhythm and has that natural feel and is getting the ball out, I mean, he is throwing guys open, making tight passes, has the arm, like we see with Dak. And then we see some of the bad with Dak Prescott too. When the pressure's on, when things start breaking down, I think Jaxson Dart, because of the offense that he was in with Lane Kiffin, doesn't always have answers. He has some of the worst quarterback film in this class. If you watch the Georgia game or late in the Florida game, I mean, it's some of the worst. And then he has some of the best film in this class. If you watch Arkansas, you watch the bowl game against Duke, Jaxson Dart looks like a top 5 pick. So it's like, who are we getting? And right. How can I project an offense that is, I don't want to say gimmicky, but as gimmicky as you can be in today's world where, a lot of things are predetermined for where Jaxson Dart's supposed to go with the football. And that's not going to happen in the NFL. So I think with his rushing ability, with his arm, Jaxson Dart has star fantasy potential. I would take him in fantasy rookie. If I had a rookie draft right now, I'd take him over Shedeur Sanders just for that upside. But I think there's a lot of downside to Jaxson Dart as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that you have to weigh when you are investing in your Superflex rookie draft. Speaking of rookie drafts, but non-Superflex, Todd Hunter chiming in with another question here. And because we love Todd, we'll get it in to him before our first break. Have we pretty much settled on Omarion Hampton being the number 2 overall rookie pick in non-Superflex drafts? So I think Ashton Jeanty seems to be the 101 even in Superflex. But if we take the quarterbacks out of the equation, Shane, it seems like Omarion Hampton is going in the first round. Do you see that as I don't want to see what does Thanos say? He's inevitable. Is Omarion Hampton inevitable in the first round this year? Because if he is, he's probably going to be going to the back end, which should be a fairly good offense, which would be good for him. Your thoughts on Omarion Hampton being locked in to the 102 in non-Superflex rookie drafts right now?
I don't think I can lock it in because there's a lot that can happen. I do think Omarion Hampton is a first-round pick, deserves to be a first-round pick. I think his workouts really solidified that with a 4.46 at 221 pounds, plus his receiving ability out of the combine. He's one of the best pass-catching backs in those drills. So I think he should be a first-round pick. And I think if he goes to a team that we feel like he gets the opportunity, probably locked into that 102. But stranger things have happened where a team that, like we talked about before, didn't need a running back or has another guy, wants a 2-headed monster, and then we get Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins to the Cowboys. Like, Well, they're not that far apart, right? I mean, Hampton isn't that much above those guys. So, yeah, and what happens if Tet McMillan, we'll talk about the receivers, gets drafted in a really good spot with a good quarterback and is the wide receiver one. I just think there's so many variables. I'm not ready to lock him in right now as the 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think we can't really. I mean, Todd, and I know what you're saying here too, but like a player like Hampton, I think we cannot lock in until after day 2 of the NFL draft. Like, regardless of where he goes, it's going to be really tough to do it even after Thursday, Shane. Like, I don't even, if he goes in the first round, you never know what can happen in the second round of the draft. We've been talking a lot of rookies tonight, and if you want to put this rookie knowledge to good use, pick up a Dynasty Orphan today over at myffpc.com. myffpc.com is your home for Dynasty Fantasy Football. 1,800 plus leagues over the last 15 years. None have ever folded. Entry fees range from $77 all the way up to $5,000. However, if you go to myffpc.com/dynasty right now, you're going to see a lot of discounted teams, a lot of teams that you can take on basically for free in 2025 and maybe carry them to the playoffs and make some money on it going forward as you rebuild those orphans into juggernauts. myffpc.com, myffpc.com. We have spent the first hour of the show talking about the backfields. Shane, let's talk about the pass catchers. Is it a down year for wide receivers? I don't know. I initially thought it was, and now I hear a lot of people talking about how deep the class is and how many difference makers there are in this class. Shane Hallam from DraftSharks. When we come back, we'll talk about Emeka Egbuka, Tyler Warren. Let's talk about Jalen Royals, Jack Bech, and Harold Fannin Jr. as far as pass catchers go. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. You are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm, and if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got the combine. We got the draft. We got free agency coming up here. We got a lot of speculation to do, and the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. Mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early Superflex drafts now, where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the never too early best ball and the never too early Superflex contest, to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
It's a great tournament that's going on. So nice they did it twice over at the FFPC. The Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament features a $40,000 grand prize, a $125 entry fee. The Superflex Never Too Early Tournament features just a $35 entry fee, and you can win $10,000. Tournaments are going to go all the way up until April 24th, which is 4 weeks from today. Drafts are available 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clock, whatever you want, for the FFPC Never Too Early tournaments. myffpc.com, myffpc.com is where to go for that. I am joined tonight by Draft Wunderkind, Shane Hallam, breaking down the pass catchers, which is we're going to get to tonight. I want to do this at the top of the show, Shane, and I forgot about it. How did you sort of get into your NFL draft prognostication? Dynasty, Devi. I mean, your Twitter profile at x.com/Shane P. Hallam says it. If there is a fantasy league format, you play it. You play everything. You play Devi, you play Dynasty, auction, redraft, whatever it is, you are playing it. How did you get into the NFL draft aspect of fantasy football so much?
It's fun. I always liked being like a big fish in a small pond. So I would go on the fantasy football forums back in the early 2000s and talk draft, and go on the draft forums and talk fantasy, right? Like I liked being the expert of the thing. And so, it kind of led me to just get into the rookies. I always loved college football. I went to Ohio State. Like I was going to go to a football school, was kind of inevitable. And I love watching film. Like I sucked at football. I played one day of high school football and dropped the pass and got hit. And they basically like, you should probably just go. That was the extent of my football. I'm not athletic. So, but I was like, but I can watch film.
You love the game. Football. You still love the game though.
Right. So like this is a way to kind of, if I can't play, then I'm going to be the best at watching these guys and knowing who's good and who's not and what's going to happen. And fantasy and the draft, I think both allow you to do that.
We're going to talk about Tet McMillan in the next segment because I feel like this is the bulky pokes holes formulation of questions here coming up. And maybe the poking of holes is not warranted and it's lazy, but I'm going to do it. Emeka Egbuka is the first guy I want to talk about. Emeka Egbuka is the all-time leading receiver in Ohio State history. And even if you think about recent history there with Jaxson Smith-Njigba and Garrett Wilson and, all these guys, David Boston is another guy that comes
Chris
to
Carter,
mind. Chris Olave, Chris Carter. Yeah, absolutely. I don't view his ceiling in the NFL as very high. And maybe I'm doing that at my own risk because I know how valuable this guy can be in the slot. I know how big and physical he is. I know how well he runs his routes. And at the Ohio State Pro Day, he ran a great 40. The thing that I keep coming back to with Egbuka, Shane, is I don't know if he is elite anywhere. And if you are not elite anywhere coming into the pros, I feel like that limits your ceiling a little bit. Am I wrong about him not being elite at any facet of his game? And am I also wrong saying like, this is a guy that you should probably be looking away from in your first round? Maybe look at him if he gets to the second round of your rookie draft, but he's not the guy I'm excited to utilize my first round rookie pick on.
Look, I love Emeka Egbuka. I think he is elite as a route runner off the line. I mean, I think those slants and drags and out routes and corner routes, like he can run. He's run everything from the slot and had success at that. I think 10 years ago, I'm kind of with you, but now the slot position is where I want Jamar Chase in the slot. Like he does better in the slot. Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb, these are players that have elite athleticism and route running ability. And I think Emeka Egbuka has some of that Amon-Ra St. Brown physicality that he brings to the table. And that, to me, that combination of route running and being physical is just tough. But, do we get Amon-Ra St. Brown? Do we get Deontay Johnson part 2, right? A really good route runner that just it can never quite get the production. The athleticism at his pro day was surprising to me. I mean, the 4.45 was better than I expected for Egbuka. The 1.5 10-yard split was 97th percentile for a wide receiver. Like just really elite speed that he never necessarily showcased. To me, that's upside. I mean, that's great. And maybe there's more out there, like we saw with JSN. Maybe Egbuka could play on the outside a little bit. Maybe we get that. So to me, he's a wide receiver too. I think he has less upside than the next couple receivers, but I'm interested in the PPR league for sure because Egbuka could be a 100-catch type player.
The other thing that has me decreasing my interest in Egbuka is some of the reasons you just stated, Shane. That he had such a great athletic performance at his pro day that I think is not only going to push him up to the first round of the NFL draft, it's going to push him up in general in rookie drafts to a point where I'm like, I'm not comfortable taking him. And maybe that does not work out for me. Maybe I'm like kicking myself this time next year. Like I should have drafted Brian Tomlinson a bunch of first rounds in my rookie draft last year and only got him in a handful. And maybe that's Egbuka. I don't know. Certainly a possibility. We'll see what happens there. But certainly I can tell you without any kind of doubt, what Emeka Egbuka did at his pro day at Ohio State has done nothing but significantly increase his draft stock in the NFL and rookie drafts right now. Speaking of increasing his draft stock, Jalen Royals did a really good job at the Senior Bowl this year. How much did his draft stock go up when you consider where you thought about him before the Senior Bowl and then how you thought of him as a pro prospect after the Senior Bowl, Shane? I know this is probably like almost a month ago right now, but think about how Royals has changed his ADP over the course of the last, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Royals was that player that when I watched him in December, went back to the film, I liked him a ton. And I was like, am I too high? You have that, right? Where like there are guys, Kobe Hudson's a guy that might not even get drafted. I was really high on. And I'm like, oh, I think I was wrong. Like, I watched on a good day. I was feeling good. That happens. And you got to go back and check your biases. And Royals was a player like that where I was like, am I like too high on him? And then the Senior Bowl happened where, Royals is coming from Utah State, wasn't asked to run these crisp routes and separate in man coverage. And then at the Senior Bowl, man, that's all he did. I think it locked him into day 2, and he's probably going to be a round 2 pick. And that allowed me to be like, phew, like I was right on what I was seeing. He showed that he could run all the routes, even if he wasn't asked to. The 4.42 40 time at the combine was excellent. Really is Rashee Rice-esque in what Royals can do. You can use him as kind of an offensive weapon in the backfield, getting screen passes, short passes after the catch. Royals is phenomenal. I think he's going to be a heavy player for me to target in that, one quarterback, maybe like 201, 202 type range if he goes to a decent situation with a quarterback.
Rashee Rice was the 55th overall pick in the draft 2 years ago. Are we going to see a similar draft capital utilized for Royals this year?
Yeah, I think he's going to be right around there. I would say he'll be a top 75 pick for sure.
Okay. Jack Bech is a player that's being drafted as the 81st overall receiver in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament right now. I don't know where he's at as far as rookies go, but Bech is a guy that I heard above average things prior to the Senior Bowl. I heard great things about him after the Senior Bowl, and I've heard very good things about him since then, including but not limited to the NFL Scouting Combine. Are we sleeping on him right now? I feel like for a guy that should get day 2 draft capital, maybe second round draft capital, he should probably be going higher in the 19th round in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament. But as far as Dynasty goes, this is a guy who should be firmly planted after his draft capital gets revealed in a month in the second round of your Dynasty rookie drafts. Are we sleeping on him? Are we too high on him? What are your feelings on Jack Bech?
I think we are sleeping on him. Matt Schauf, my colleague at DraftSharks, big fan of Jack Bech. And it's kind of one of those weird situations where if you are a poor athlete at the receiver position, but are drafted in the top 100, you actually have a better hit rate than guys who are better athletes, right? Because if an NFL team is going to take you round 2 or round 3, and you're not a great athlete, you must be really good at everything else. Yeah. And they actually turn into better players. I think Jack Bech is that type of player. Like he didn't run at the combine. I don't know if we're ever going to get a 40 time for Jack Bech. It's probably not in his interest to have that. He's not a fast player. He's not a super athletic player, but there's no weakness outside of that. Like he runs routes. Every route he runs looks the same. It's kind of a weird thing, but it's really important. The defensive back doesn't know if he's cutting inside. Is he running a slant? Is he running a 9 route? Is he running an out route? I don't know, because every single route looks the same, and he doesn't move his upper body or his lower body until he's ready to make that cut. It's such a hard thing to do at the receiver position. Even the best guys don't do that. Devontae Adams is a player who does that really, really well. We've seen him develop that in the NFL. So I think if Jack Bech is going to be a day 2 pick, and it looks like he is, I think we're sleeping on him, because I think he's going to be, I don't want to say Ladd McConkey had such a good rookie year, but I think could be that type of player that comes in and just keeps getting open and catching passes, and you're like, this guy shouldn't be able to do this, but he does.
Let me ask you this, and maybe this is lazy analysis by me. How does Jack Bech compare to, let's say, Jordy Nelson?
I think Jordy Nelson was a much better deep threat athlete coming out than Jack Bech is, right? I think Nelson developed a lot of those route running techniques kind of getting into the NFL. And, I liken Bech. I'm trying to think of maybe a better comp, but
let's just, for lazy analysis sake, he is an unpolished Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, I think he's like I feel like Bech is polished, but not the athlete that Jordy Nelson was.
All right.
coming
Okay.
in, if that makes sense.
So a poor man's Jordy Nelson. I don't know why I keep coming back to Jordy Nelson. Maybe it's I'm a Packers guy and I keep coming back to it. But I just feel like that was the type of guy coming into the pros. Like Nelson could do it all. And Bech, I think, can do it all, just maybe not to the degree that Nelson was able to do.
Right. So I think it makes it interesting, makes it intriguing of the possibilities with him. Yeah.
Let's talk about Xavier Restrepo, because this was a guy I would not say fired up to draft back in January, Shane, but I thought this guy was probably going to be a pretty solid mid-second round pick at worst in my rookie drafts. And now that I've seen the testing and I've seen what he did at the Senior Bowl, I'm less high on him. I wouldn't say I'm out on him, but his pro day stuff, I think he had his pro day, or is this the combine numbers I'm looking at right now? I don't know.
Pro day
was uninspiring. I mean, really uninspiring. And I know what he did in college, which is good, but he also had Cam Ward throwing to him, which I think we can't forget about. Are you avoiding Xavier Restrepo in rookie drafts now that we have seen more numbers come in post-college career? We've seen the testing numbers come in. Are you kind of out on Restrepo, or am I overrating these numbers over the last month?
I don't think you're overrating them. I thought I was out on Restrepo. We're actually doing a staff rookie mock draft right now, and I actually took him. So I guess I'm not fully out, but I took him at
hold on. Where did you? 412. Okay.
412 and a one quarterback, right? So like at that point, you're looking at day 3 receivers. You're looking at late day 3 running backs. Like I'll take the chance at that point. I mean, I think that the 4.8 is bad. I mean, it's really bad for him. I think it's going to be tough for him to get drafted. I think he's the back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Didn't have Cam Ward this year. Certainly did not have Cam Ward the year before when he still put that up. But his film has holes. It's not like, he was this, great player on film, and then, man, the athleticism is just so bad. If that 4.83 number is legitimate, there wasn't an injury or anything, it's going to be tough, I think, to draft him. But if he does still go, if he goes 4th or 5th round still, then I'm like, teams like him enough still. If he gets 6, 7 undrafted, I'm probably out.
One of the things when I was preparing this rundown was I wrote on here, how big of a target is Tez Johnson for you? And then I read that back and I'm like, that's not the best way to phrase this, because this guy is perhaps the smallest target we have seen in the NFL draft in quite some time. So I changed it to how big of a draft target is Tez Johnson for you. Tez Johnson, I mean, he was awesome at the Senior Bowl. Nobody could cover Johnson. We saw, who was the guy from Florida State? I should know him. The corner.
Azaria Thomas.
Azaria Thomas. That was specifically, getting in line at drills so he could match up with Tez Johnson, because he knew that was if he could cover him, that was going to go a long way. Spoiler alert, or not spoiler alert. Narrator said it did not go well for Thomas because he could not cover Tez Johnson. Nobody could cover Tez Johnson at the Senior Bowl. And yet he weighed just more than the steak I had last night, Shane, at 156 pounds. It's insane how small this guy is, but it's also insane how well he did at Oregon and how well he did at the Senior Bowl. How big of a draft target is Tez Johnson for you in rookie drafts? Understanding that a lot of this depends upon draft capital, and if he's not being picked till the 6th or 7th round of the NFL draft, well, we know how the NFL views him. But as of right now, what do you think about Johnson?
He's one of those situations where it's wait and see, not just for the draft capital, but I also think situation as well. Do you have an offensive scheme that can scheme him up? I mean, being under 5'10", $154, running a 4.51 is not good. Like, I think there's a lot of NFL teams that will not have Tez Johnson on their board, but elite explosion workouts, elite agility workouts. That's why he wanted the Senior Bowl, because he is quick as hell. Even if he doesn't have that deep speed, I mean, he can get open. It's really hard to cover in the short area. So I think Tez Johnson, if there's an NFL team that likes him enough, and like you said, takes him in the 4th round, then I think I'm on board. I think he could become a real value if people are overlooking him in rookie drafts because of that 154 number. But most of these small receivers we've seen have success, the Hollywood Browns, the Devonta Smiths, they're fast, and Tej Johnson's not fast, and that's still hesitates. I hesitate a little bit because of that.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. Like, you run his speed at 180, 190 pounds. Okay, we can get over it. 156 pounds, 154, whatever it was. It's a little bit difficult to make the leap to say, hey, this guy is going to be a successful fantasy football player in the NFL. Flipping it over to tight ends now, Shane. I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but sometimes I can help myself. Brock Bowers had the greatest tight end rookie season of anybody in the NFL. You can make the case that he had the greatest pass catching rookie season of anybody in NFL history. So far be it for me to compare the tight end 1 in this year's class to Brock Bowers. But I'm going to do it anyway. Tyler Warren out of Penn State. I've heard, I watched this guy. I mean, I'm a Wisconsin guy, so I watched him play against Penn State. I watched a lot of Big Ten this season. Tyler Warren was a player that they utilized inline. They utilized in the slot, out wide. They utilized him in the backfield. He was a do-it-all type guy. I would not confuse his athleticism for what Brock Bowers had, even as a true freshman at Georgia. Is it fair to compare Tyler Warren at all to Brock Bowers?
I think it's fair to compare that type of usage. You actually missed one. They used him at quarterback as well.
That's right. Yeah.
He was if the tush push doesn't get banned, Tyler Warren's the guy I want back there. The tush push. I mean, the strength and ability for him to pick up some of the short yardage for Penn State was crazy to me. I think the size difference from a fantasy perspective, just you're looking at, Brock Bowers at 6'3", 240 was a lot more receiver than Tyler Warren at 6'6", 256, is going to be. And so I think from a fantasy perspective, that's maybe a little bit too high praise. Didn't have the early breakout. Like you said, Brock Bowers, the freshman, true freshman, 18 years old, was phenomenal. Tyler Warren was behind Brenton Strange, day 2 pick, Theo Johnson, round 4 pick. So he didn't get to really break out until that last year, which is a little bit concerning. We're not going to get the athleticism. There's no way that Warren's going to work out. So I think there's a lot of holes there that worry me. But, if it seems by all accounts he's going to be a top 20 pick and even has a chance to be a top 10 pick, if NFL teams are doing that, then certainly I think Tyler Warren has upside, especially in the red zone. I think he's phenomenal. The film's great this year. And I just want to see someone be creative with him. I think Tyler Warren can pay dividends.
As far as the first round picks go, I mean, we've seen, I think Indianapolis is a pretty popular landing spot. I've seen the Chargers as well. The Jets is another one. Is there a team, knowing their head coach, knowing their offensive coordinator, that you would love to see Tyler Warren go to?
I actually would. I ideally like to see him go, and maybe year one, it wouldn't be helpful for us, but I think the Miami Dolphins would be really intriguing in that Jonnu Smith role that we saw have such success last year. You're able to line up Tyler Warren in the slot, make him kind of that primary Jonnu kind of underneath guy who can do a lot of different things. I think the creativity of the offense could go far. Maybe as fantasy players for year one, we wouldn't be super happy, but I think in the long run, that could be really interesting.
Elijah Arroyo, as long as we're talking about tight ends here, out of Miami, looked the part in Miami sporadically. Like, he would make some plays where you're like, yes, this guy's going to be a total hit in the NFL. And then he would disappear. Had a really good Senior Bowl. I think he raised a lot of eyes there. I think he weighed in, if I remember correctly, Shane, he weighed in heavier than I think what people thought he was going to weigh in at. And yet the athletic drills, everything that he did, he looked really fast. He looked really quick. So, that weight seemingly was not bad weight. It was good weight. But as far as his college production and knowing how inconsistent he was, how much are you dinging Arroyo for that type of performance as he gets to the next level here?
I think this is why it's so important to go to the film or find someone that you trust that watches film, because I think Arroyo's inconsistency wasn't on him. And a common theme for some of these potential day 2 tight ends in this class, their offenses just didn't use them, well, or didn't want to use the tight end position. I think in college, the tight end position is so much more difficult to excel at because, man, the hashes are wider. There's no reason to throw it to the tight end. Like the receivers are, the receivers have more space to get open with those hashes tighter. So I think Elijah Arroyo, it wasn't necessarily on him. The offense didn't really accentuate the tight end, but his talent forced them to use him when you have those stretches where they needed a first down or needed a touchdown. He was often the target. The 7 touchdowns this year from a tight end in that system is phenomenal, to be honest with you. And I think he's going to be a good one. And I'm hearing some first round rumblings for Elijah Arroyo in the back end.
Elijah Arroyo, if I'm looking at this correctly, with your Dynasty Superflex rankings, is tight end 4 for you. Tight end 3, which you can find this at DraftSharks.com, by the way. Tight end 3 for you is Mason Taylor, who is obviously, and I'm, people are going to get sick of hearing this. He's Jason Taylor's son, and obviously the bloodlines are there from LSU. Is he going to be a better NFL tight end, or is he going to be a better fantasy tight end? Or Shane, option 3, doesn't it matter because this guy's going to be good at both?
I don't think it matters too much. I think Arroyo has the upside. Mason Taylor, I think lock him in. You draft him, you plug him in day 1, and he's going to produce for you. I mean, how many tight ends have we seen in the NFL have positive fantasy seasons, multiple seasons? Dalton Schultz and Jake Ferguson, being a two-way tight end who has soft hands and a really good feel for zone coverage. You can be a great tight end in the NFL that way. I'd even put, Travis Kelce and George Kittle. I don't think are these all world, athletes at the tight end position that could play receiver. These are guys that are physical, but are so smart and play so smart. I think that's what Mason Taylor brings to the table. So I think he's both. I mean, I feel more confident that Mason Taylor is going to step in day 1 as an NFL starting tight end, and we'll see if that translates to fantasy production if the offense allows then Arroyo. But I think both are probably top 50 picks in the draft, and we've seen the success of guys like Sam Laporta, going in round 2, Trey McBride. I think probably one of Taylor and Arroyo are going to be that next really good fantasy tight end taken in round 2.
Shane, if I set the over-under at 2.5 for tight ends taken in the first round, day 1 of the NFL draft this year, would you take the under or would you take the over?
Betting wise, I would take the under, but I am not confident. I think when we saw it last year with the receivers in the back end of round 1, right? We were like Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette. I think tight end is where someone can move in to take one of these 2 players. So I'm not confident, but I'll take the under right now.
Cullen Hoffman chiming in on YouTube. He loves Harold Fannin Jr. potential as well as a pass catcher. You have Fannin right now as 43 overall in your Dynasty Superflex rookie draft rankings, and we'll unpack those in the next segment. But I think the thing that I ask first when I see that Fannin number at 43, how much did you move him down after the Senior Bowl, after the Combine? Because to me, this guy was much higher 2 months ago, Shane, than he was, or than he is right now.
Yeah, the best tight end production of all time in college football. And so he was tight end 3. I mean, I think you had to kind of lock him in, but going to Bowling Green, watching the film, he's always open, and that is usually good. At tight end, sometimes that's not good. He didn't face a lot of man coverage. MAC teams were not trying to man up on Harold Fannin. I think he was schemed really well, open, to get those receptions. And he's an average athlete. We saw that at the Combine. I think the Senior Bowl exposed some of the issues when he goes man against safeties, against linebackers who are NFL caliber. Fannin doesn't know what to do. I don't think he has a natural feel for the position yet. He feels like that guy that's going to get drafted round 3, and then he's just never the starter, right? We saw it last year right? With in Washington, where like Zach Ertz just kind of stuck around, and we didn't get to see.
Is he this year's Mike Gesicki?
Yeah, yes, something like that, where the potential's there, but just he doesn't have that, doesn't really have it like between the years yet, I think, to face. I think if Harold Fannin had gone to Oregon, the production would have been so much less for him, if that makes sense. Also, the one thing that gets me with him when you watch him is he has a weird gait. Like the way he runs is super odd, and his legs are kind of jetting out and like don't line up. Like it's just asking for someone to break his leg. Like the injury, I think there's some injury potential with the way that with the way that Fannin plays. So I see that Cohen chimed in with Fannon's not a fullback like Ben Sinnott. There's a lot of teams that have Fannin as an H-back. Like he's been ranked as a fullback, I think. So not that he's going to play fullback, but I think he is more of an H-back than an inline tight end.
We had who were we talking about earlier in the show, Shane, where his best game was against I got to scroll up on my rundown. His best game was against a really, really good with Jeanty, right?
Against Oregon, yeah.
Against Oregon, right? And then you had Harold Fannin Jr., as Cullen is pointing out, his best game against Penn State, one of the best defenses in the country. So I think that there's something to be said about that. But we talk about how he just doesn't have that instinct. He has a weird way of running that might present him to injury. May I introduce you to the Cincinnati Bengals tight ends in Gesicki and Eric All. The perfect combination of being like a pass catching only tight end and a guy that is prone to injury with All. And I hope All gets better because he should continue that long line of Iowa tight ends in the NFL. I loved Eric All, and it just sucks that what happened to him. We'll see what happens as he tries to bounce back. Okay, here's what I want to do. We have 26 minutes plus left in the show. What I want to do in the next segment, Shane, is focus on the Superflex Dynasty rankings that you guys have up at DraftSharks. This is something that you had posted on DraftSharks, earlier this week on Tuesday, I want to say.
I updated, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I want to delve into that. We won't hit on everybody. If you want to see everybody, go to DraftSharks.com. You'll be able to see it there. But we will hit on players like Tet McMillan, Elic Ayomanor, if I'm pronouncing that right, Damien Martinez, Cam Skattebo, and by request, Colston Loveland in the chat room as well. He's Shane Hallam from DraftSharks. Follow him on the X at Shane P. Hallam. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Final break of the show coming up now. And then in 90 seconds, we'll be back with the DraftSharks Dynasty Superflex rookie rankings. You're watching the Better Sports Network.
If you want to play Superflex tight end premium, boy, do I have a spot for you to do that. MyFFPC.com. And if you use promo code COOP right now, they'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And there's two ways to play. You can do a startup where you're just drafting from scratch. And that's a big endeavor. And as Jag said, if you mess it up, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt for a long time. Then there's my favorite one, the funnest version, which is picking up what they call an orphan team, which is one that someone's abandoned. And they basically put them on there and sell them for less than what the buy-in is. So you can go up, pick some of these teams. Some of them are bad. I mean, Jag, you and me were looking through of them. One of them is a $750 buy-in team you can buy for $1. That's the ultimate move, is to save one of these teams and you get it at a discount. Go over to my FFPC, get set up now. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35.
Talking about FFPC Dynasty teams, check them out at myffpc.com. Those entry fees, some of them have been reduced to $1. Normally they go from $77 all the way up to $5,000. Check it out right now. 1,800 plus leagues over the course of 15 years. None have ever folded. myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Hanging out with Shane Hallam tonight from DraftSharks.com at Shane P. Hallam on the X. The Dynasty Superflex rankings that you had updated less than or maybe just over 48 hours ago on DraftSharks.com. This is becoming a somewhat weekly segment, and I should get it sponsored, by somebody. Tet McMillan. Go ahead, Shane, and sell me on Tet McMillan as the wide receiver 1 in this draft. And if you can't do it, or if you don't want to do it, that's a suitable answer as well.
No, I'll do it. And, my colleague Kevin English at DraftSharks, who's one of the best dynasty minds and is always in the background, did a great report on DraftSharks if you want to look at the film. But, McMillan was a high recruit, an early breakout. He's had 8+ receiving touchdowns every single year. He played for Arizona. This isn't a powerhouse team. And he produced 4.4 speed at 6'5", 212. Just the fluidity that Tet McMillan moves with. You saw him as a freshman at 18 years old, just really clown future NFL corners. I think a lot of us in the Devy community pegged him, 5 games into his career. Like, this guy's going to be really good. I think the problem with Tet McMillan comes from the early hype. Is he Jamar Chase? He's not Jamar Chase, right? He's not like that level of prospect. And I think that's what people want. We don't have that level of prospect in this draft. But, if he falls in your rookie draft, I think you can get value if people get scared away, or if Matthew Golden from Texas goes above Tet McMillan in the NFL draft and people start freaking out. I think Tet McMillan's the most talented receiver in this draft and probably has some of that Drake London, T. Higgins in him. Maybe not Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, and that's okay. I think Tet McMillan could be a really good fantasy receiver.
Where do you have him in your latest mock draft, in real life, going in the NFL? Because I've seen him slip. He was like a top 10 pick, top 15 pick like a month and a half ago. I've seen him slip to the 20s right now. Do you also have him slipping to the 20s, Shane, or is he going higher than that? Tet McMillan out of Arizona.
I have him slipping down a little bit. Right now, I think I had him going 18 to the Seattle Seahawks to replace DK Metcalf. So in that that's
a good landing spot if he ends up in Seattle.
Right. I think it'd be a solid place. I think they're going to want to, support Sam Darnold and have that kind of outside receiver who can swap with JSN in the slot or outside. So I think that 18 to 25, 26 range is probably where he's at.
Go back 1 year ago today, March 27th, 2024. Was Luther Burden the wide receiver you had going first in your 2025 NFL mock draft?
He was. I think I had him. I think Tet McMillan was close, but I think Luther Burden was a top 10 pick.
So then this is my leading question. Are we overanalyzing the step back that his statistics took in 2024 when we look at how good of a pro prospect he's going to be?
Probably. I think we probably are doing that. You look at Missouri, they were one of the best offenses in the SEC in 2023, and then one of the worst in 2024. So the offense was like, we need to throw screen passes to Luther Burden or just get the ball in his hands. And he didn't really have the offense to support him breaking big plays or anything like that. I think a lot of the issues with him dropping is maybe not necessarily the 2024. I mean, there's been a lot of issues with his practice. He didn't really practice at Missouri, apparently. One of the problems, he was a 5-star recruit. And why did he stay at Missouri, right? Like, in today's NIL, that Georgia and Alabama were throwing $1 million at Luther Burden, right? So there's kind of the talk that Missouri basically let him he didn't have to come to practice. Like, he didn't have to practice. Yeah. And that was the way that they kept him. And what does that mean for the NFL? What does that mean for his effort? I think those questions probably loom larger on why he's a borderline first-round pick than a top 20 guy.
Another player, a wide receiver that we have not talked about a ton on this show, shouldn't say mostly, but part of the reason is I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've heard Elic Ayomanor. I've heard Elic Ayomanor. Shane, you are the pronunciation king. How do I pronounce it? And how good Ayomanor. Okay. So how good is Stanford's Elic Ayomanor going to be once he gets to the next level? Maybe this is helmet scouting, which is something I didn't realize was a thing until about 2 months ago. But a lot of people are comparing him to Michael Wilson. Is that apt? Is he better? Is he going to be worse than Michael Wilson at the next level? Because I've seen this guy mocked, quite frankly, a lot in the second round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, I love him, and I'm ready to be disappointed. I think the mocks are over-projecting Ayomanor a little bit. I'm hoping he gets into the third round. I'll be happy. There's some talk about him going day 3. like when you watch him, he can do everything except catch, which is not great for a wide receiver, I guess.
That's the worst. That is the worst thing. That's the absolute worst. That's just terrible.
Look, but I feel like if an NFL coach, a receiver coach can teach you anything, I'd hope it's how to catch, right? Like I feel like it's a one thing maybe you can get better at. But I mean the toughness, like he's powerful off the line, he's fast. We saw the low 4.4 speed, the official 4.44 at 206 pounds, really good. The Stanford offense was so abysmal his entire career there, the 2 years that he played, and they just threw it up to him. And yeah, the one thing is like he has a lot of focus drops, he body catches, like he doesn't know how to catch the football. And if you can teach him how to catch the football, I think this guy can be a stud. So I'm in. I mean, 1,800 yards in 2 years on that Stanford offense is impressive, even if it doesn't sound like it.
So Cullen Hoffman is pointing out that he cannot get the game against Travis Hunter out of his head when Ayomanor really owned Travis Hunter when Stanford played Colorado. He also says Wicks ? Crying face emoji. And I don't know if it's serious or not, but let's not compare Ayomanor to Michael Wilson for a second. Let's compare him to Dontavian Wicks, which I can kind of see the comparisons between the two, given how their career has gone or how their career went over the last couple of years in college. When you look at Ayomanor to Wicks, how do those guys compare?
No, I think it's comparable. I mean, Wicks had the production in Virginia offense, but I think what we saw with Wicks this past season, I think Ayomanor has that, where a lot of the nuances, the things you want to happen, the things that PFF grades on, right? Ayomanor does really well. Wicks does really well. He always had that good PFF grade that first year. But some of those little things, I think Kevin in our rookie guide comped Ayomanor to Robert Woods as a player. I think it's that type of physicality, and early Robert Woods probably makes sense.
He's a second round pick. I want to say at a Texas A&M. Shane, is that right?
I think that's right.
Somewhere in Texas. I just know because I'm a bitter
Oklahoma
Packer.
State, was it? Oklahoma.
Oh, Robert Woods. God,
Robert
no,
Woods, USC. Yeah.
It was USC. I was thinking of Robert Ferguson. But my old Packers nemesis, who was a second round pick. Yeah,
I was thinking Rashawn Woods when I said Oklahoma State.
Oh,
so
Rashawn Woods.
We're all over the place with this.
Well, this is what happens last half hour of the show. This happens. Speaking of my Packers, I've been kind of secretly hoping they get Jaden Higgins in the NFL draft. I think he would match up with what the Packers need. And what would help them most, not only in 2025, but beyond, if Watson and Dobbs end up hitting free agency and are not with the team anymore. Jaden Higgins, you have ranked on DraftSharks.com in your Dynasty rookie drafts as 20th overall. If we scroll down, we will see Jalen Noel. I think it's Noel, not Noel, Noel. 34th overall. Does that mean that Higgins is the better pro prospect than Noel? And is it significant given that 9 spots separate the two?
I think Higgins is better just because he has that, 6'4", 215. Higgins reminds me a lot of Nico Collins as a prospect. So like Higgins and Jalen Royals are my guys that I want in my rookie drafts at receiver. Like I think Higgins has that type of natural ability to be that big X who's athletic enough to make you pay if you're a smaller corner. He's big and long and is going to keep you off of him. But you're a big corner, tries to jam him, you can't do it, and is fluid enough that like he's hard to cover. So the coordination, the boxes are checked. I think he's just at Iowa State because Jalen Noel's on the other side. Jaden Higgins wasn't running a ton of routes. They sent him down the field and kind of let him freelance a little bit. So I think there's some rawness to him. Noel's probably a little more polished. I think in the NFL draft, they could be drafted pretty close together, but I'm definitely more of a Higgins guy from a fantasy perspective because I think the upside is, like I said, I think Nico Collins top 10 NFL receiver type upside.
We have to talk about this now. We've stumbled upon this. Higgins compared to Collins. Collins is going in the first round of FFPC Never Too Early best ball tournaments right now. I understand Higgins is going to be a rookie this year. Collins has a few years on him. But what do you see from Higgins that reminds you of Collins specifically, Shane?
Yeah, I think that the size and movement skill set is similar to both coming into the NFL, right? And Collins got kind of dinged for being at Michigan and didn't have that production because they didn't throw the football. But when you watch Nico Collins, I was a big Nico Collins guy, where, he's moving like he's 190 pounds and he's 20 pounds heavier than that. And I think that's what Jaden Higgins does. I mean, he's moving like he's a 190-pound receiver, but he has the arm length and the physicality that, like, how do you cover a player that moves like that at that size? And to me, that's kind of a cheat code, even if there's rawness to the route running or how he catches the football. I think Nico Collins came in with that too, right? I mean, he took a little bit for us to get, round one FFPC drafted Nico Collins. I think Jaden Higgins could be the same way. Year one, maybe a little disappointing, but I think that potential really is there to develop into a high-end NFL receiver.
Those are the Iowa State receivers. Let's talk about the Ohio State running backs, which I think, after looking at the DraftSharks Superflex Dynasty rookie rankings, is more compelling of a conversation at DraftSharks.com. Right now, Shane Hallam, as his 10th overall player in Dynasty rookie drafts, Travion Henderson. As his 11th overall player, Quinshon Judkins, running back, Ohio State. By the thinnest of margins, you have Henderson over Judkins. We're probably picking at nits. We're splitting hairs here. What makes you put Henderson one spot ahead of Judkins in your rookie rankings?
Pass catching. I think that's the biggest thing. I think Henderson is an elite pass catcher. I think Judkins is actually pretty good at it for his size and what he is, at 221 pounds. But, like, if I'm in a PPR league, which those Superflex rankings are, then Henderson right now wins out for me. I mean, this is the classic situation where both guys are going to go in the top 50, both maybe even have a shot to go in the first round. Like, I wouldn't be super surprised if either one made it in. So the situation, I think, is going to be dependent on who I take first in rookie drafts. But if all that stuff's even, I'll take Henderson. A little more risk with some of his health issues, especially with his foot 2 years ago. But the pass catching, I mean, that screen pass against Texas, you saw what Henderson could do in the open field. Yeah. I think is just is phenomenal for fantasy.
I think this is one of those things too. When I look at these rankings after the NFL draft, third round completes, Henderson and Judkins, there's a very, very realistic possibility these guys are nowhere close in your rankings on DraftSharks.com because of draft capital. Henderson could go in the first. I mean, quite frankly, Judkins, I guess, could go in the first round. I don't see that happening. But Henderson, I could see going in the first round. Judkins maybe slipping till the back end of the second, maybe the early third. I don't know. But I think, like, with all this running back this glut that we have this year, it's going to affect draft capital is going to affect these post-rookie rankings more so maybe since 2017 than in any recent draft. Speaking of running backs, Cam Skattebo, who I love, and I don't know if I love him as a pro player, Shane, but I loved watching him in college. You have him ranked on the DraftSharks Dynasty Superflex rankings at 21st right now. This is behind Caleb Johnson, but it is ahead of Dylan Sampson and Damien Martinez and Bichelle Tootin. Can you talk about maybe how much more important fit and the team that drafts him is for Cam Skattebo compared to some of the other running backs in this class in order for him to get NFL fantasy football success?
I think team fit's going to be most important for Skattebo. We talked about it with some of the early running backs in the first segment, but I think Skattebo is a player who, if you give him options, I don't know if the explosion is there. He loves contact, right? He's so fun to watch because in college, man, I mean, he'll run through you. And again, with DJ Giddens, like that's great in college. In the NFL, don't try to run through NFL players if you don't have to, and I think if you give him a gap scheme where it's, hey, you're running off tackle to the right tackle, or you're running a halfback dive in this gap, then I think Skattebo is going to be solid. But if you're going to put him in, say, a Kyle Shanahan scheme where it's one cut and you got to pick the hole, I don't know if I trust Cam Skattebo to pick the right hole if he's explosive enough to get to that hole before it closes. That's my one fear with him. So I'm hesitant that he can be the guy, that he's going to be, a stud workhorse running back like he was in college. But watching him, he's not someone I wanted to doubt. So I think that kind of late second round of Superflex rookie drafts is appropriate.
Is there a particular scheme or team that you want him to go to? In other words, if he goes, because he's not going to go first round, but if he goes late second round, maybe early third to a specific team, is there a squad out there you're like, oh, they took him there, I have to move him up in my rookie rankings? If you are a Cam Skattebo fan, perhaps you own him already in a Devy league and you have been managing him all the way up to the pros. Who is a team that you would root for him to be drafted by at this point that would accentuate his skills, that would really make his strength strong and hide his weaknesses?
I think there's two teams that would really fit. I said I had Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders, but if Skattebo was drafted to the Raiders, I think that, that Marshawn Lynch type of hit this hole and you're tough and you have that balance. Like, I don't think you need the explosion to succeed in that offense. And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers with Arthur Smith is actually interesting. Leans a little more zone, but I think Skattebo has a little bit more wiggle than Najee Harris did, and pairing him with the Jalen Warren, I think could really work well in that offense. So those are probably two in terms of scheme fit, even if maybe the personnel of those two teams aren't quite there for Skattebo to have a RB1 rookie season or anything. I think from a scheme perspective, I like both those fits.
Okay, so that's Skattebo, a player that I have talked about quite a bit on this show. I have not talked about Damien Martinez. I feel like this is like the universe. This is the U show tonight. If you're a Hurricanes fan, we've talked Cam Ward, we've talked Xavier Restrepo, we've talked Elijah Arroyo. Now we're talking Damien Martinez tonight. How should we be looking at him in drafts? I think with anything in rookie drafts, excuse me, Shane. I think with anything with running backs, obviously it comes down to fit and draft capital. But looking at it right now, just looking at him as a player, how do you view Damien Martinez?
He's my pick for the day 3 drafted running back who makes an immediate NFL impact. My pick to be the Bucky Irving or the Tyrone Tracy this year. I think Martinez, at Oregon State, he's powerful. He's big, 217 pounds. I think that 4.51 time was excellent. He has the explosion and the size to just punish. Miami didn't use his receiving ability. When you watch the combine, one thing I love about the combine, everyone looks at the numbers, but watch the running backs catch back to back to back to back. Who's a really good receiver. And Damien Martinez surprised me with how good he is at catching the football naturally. I think he can be a lead NFL running back. He's probably not going to go till round 4 of the NFL draft, but he's my pick for kind of the sleeper, if you will, in this deep running back class.
Cullen Hoffman also chiming in from glorious Appleton, Wisconsin, by the way. I didn't mention that with Cullen before. He wants to know, he likes Colston Loveland more than I think we were talking about Tyler Warren in the first segment or second segment, excuse me. He likes Tyler Warren, or he likes Loveland more than Tyler Warren. Are we knocking Loveland a little bit too much because of the injury that he had in 2024? Because, by and large, Shane, the mock drafts I'm looking at, and quite frankly, I don't know where you specifically have Loveland. I've seen him in the first round in a lot of drafts, and I know he is a two-way type guy. Warren more the gadget, which we love for fantasy football because they utilize him everywhere. But Loveland should be on the field a lot because he can block and because he can catch. How do you feel about Colston Loveland this year? And are we penalizing him too much for not playing a lot in 2024?
Yeah, I think if he's getting penalized for that, then you're doing it wrong. He would have stunk in Michigan's offense anyway. They didn't know how to throw the ball this year. Like, it would have been good anyway. I think it was actually kind of a little better for him. But he's a better pure athlete than Tyler Warren. I think both of these guys are going to be picked in the top 22. And that spot of going back with his old coach, 22 to the Chargers, I think that's Loveland's floor. Like, I think he could go top 20, top 15 in this draft. So I don't liking him over Tyler Warren, I think is very fair. And I think there's maybe more upside with Colston Loveland as well.
Okay. So Loveland is a guy that like the fact that he played on Michigan and the fact that he got hurt, Shane, maybe this is the best thing to happen if you want Loveland in your rookie drafts, because There's no way you could get him lower. The only way you could get him lower right now at this point is if he somehow falls out of round 1, which I don't think he's going to do, and he goes high in round 2, then this is like the biggest FFPC Dynasty rookie tight end premium draft gold mine you could strike with Loveland going forward. Terrence Ferguson, I want to talk about a little bit because he crushed the Senior Bowl this year. It's weird. I've seen him go in a lot of mocks over the last 4 days to Dallas, whose starting tight end is Jake Ferguson. So they'd have Ferguson and Ferguson starting some sort of law firm in the tight end room in Dallas right now. Is he for real? Do you believe in what you've seen at the Senior Bowl and going forward since then? Because a lot of people have moved him up their overall ranks. Right now, you have him in your DraftSharks Dynasty rookie ranks as 49 right now, non-tight end premium. So this is out of the top 4 rounds in Superflex drafts, but very close.
Yeah, I think tight end premium, he's probably a 3rd-round pick. Oregon's another one of those offenses that doesn't like to use the tight end, and Ferguson was just too talented for them not to use him, similar to Arroyo. He's really good at that stick move, the old Jason Witten, stick route where he kind of sticks in and then settles into that hole in the zone. I mean, Ferguson's good at that, but has some high athletic ceiling that we saw at the combine. So I think Ferguson, if he goes in round 3 of the NFL draft, 247, 4.63, I think he has starting upside, but I think there's downside that he doesn't make an impact as well. I think he's both ends of the spectrum, possibly.
I'm sorry, and two-way tight end in the NFL, like he can like poor man's Loveland, or are we looking at just a pass catching guy?
No, I think it's poor man's Loveland. I mean, Ferguson definitely has the hands and the strength, I think, to be a blocker. He did it at Oregon decently. I wouldn't say it's his like strength, but right. I think he's a willing blocker.
And that's fine because that gets him on the field on 3 downs as opposed to 1, which is huge for fantasy. The last thing I want to bring up tonight, Oronde Gadsden the second. This is a guy that obviously has the bloodlines. He's a tight end out of Syracuse. You post him just short of Terrence Ferguson in your Dynasty Superflex rankings right now. Why is he on your tight end premium rookie radar? What does he do that gets you excited for fantasy football, especially in the tight end premium format?
He's a wide receiver playing tight end. That's why he's exciting in a tight end premium format, because if an offensive coordinator knows how to use Oronde Gadsden the second, he's going to catch a lot of passes. Like I said, I play college fantasy football. He was a cheat code. There's not a lot of tight ends in college fantasy football that are any good. And if you had Oronde Gadsden 2 years ago, you just plugged him in and I mean, there's arguments of he shouldn't be a tight end because he plays in the slot and doesn't play in line. And it's like, look, that's not how this works, right? They list him as a tight end. So right offense, he could put up wide receiver stats at tight end, even if he's a 4th or 5th round pick in the NFL draft. I say in FFPC, I'm taking shots on Oronde Gadsden.
We always try to tailor our guest co-host in the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show to FFPC, but sometimes we get the rare unicorn like Shane Hallam, who comes on, who not only plays redraft, who not only plays tight end premium, redraft, dynasty, Devy, campus to Canton, college football, fantasy football, IDP, best ball, auction. The list goes on and on. If there is a format out there and you are playing in it and you want advice and you can't get it from anywhere else, go to x.com/Shane P. Hallam. He will have insight into this. You can check out everything over at DraftSharks.com. You've been on a lot of the DraftSharks podcasts lately, which has been awesome. I love listening to you. Is there anything else we didn't cover tonight of where we can consume more Shane Hallam content?
No, go to DraftSharks. We have a free rookie guide of 50 prospects and with write-ups on all of them, model scores, strengths and weaknesses. And I pushed the guys. We're going to 100 next week. So we're going to release version 2 with 100 just QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And so it's going to be the deepest rookie guide of any of the big fantasy sites for free at DraftSharks. We'll update it post-draft and have all those updates. So, sign up at DraftSharks. We got a rookie draft war room that takes your scoring and your league into account. For the best trade calculator that we've built better than anyone else for Dynasty, trade value charts for future picks. Like we got you covered. If you are a Dynasty head, I mean, DraftSharks can be your cheat code and your unfair advantage for sure.
I've been a subscriber to DraftSharks for, I don't know, the better part of 2 decades. DraftSharks.com. I use the War Room for all my early best ball drafts, for quite frankly, all my redraft leagues that are going on in August and September. I'm still using DraftSharks for that. It's fantastic. We cited all the Dynasty Superflex rookie rankings, which you can get at DraftSharks.com for all the latest updates on everything Shane's writing about. X.com/Shane P. Hallam, X.com/DraftSharks, and of course, DraftSharks.com. Shane, always a treat every time we do this show, every single year. I'm so glad. You have made me a better Dynasty rookie draft player tonight in talking through a lot of these positions, a lot of these players that we've discussed tonight. So thank you for that. And we will continue to follow all your work going forward, because we're 4 weeks away from the NFL draft. Now is the time to load up. Now is the time to cram. You've been cramming since, like, I don't know, the first Trump administration, I think, for this specific draft. So you know more so than anybody else out there everything there is to know about these guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight for 2 full hours. We will talk with you again very soon. I think we still got Shane.